Hello, and welcome everyone to the Emancipated Citizen Podcast. My name is Zacharias, and with me is the one and only Benjamin Snow. For the first time ever, we are together in the same place, recording here.
First time we've ever even been in the same country at the same time since we've known each other.
We've actually never met in person before.
Yeah.
I believe that Benjamin has become such a good friend of mine, and I've come to respect him as much as I probably respect anyone in this world for just the amount that he's that he cares about people and has put in so much personal effort because of solidarity with other human beings. It's only been about 7 years since we've met and started working together. So perhaps your memory is a little bit more clear on the exact details of that.
I reached out to you after you were interviewed on the secular jihadists.
So I was interviewed on the secular jihadists not very long after I applied for asylum, and it was clear to me that I needed to seek protection. And of course, at that time, it made most sense to kind of go full in on my activism and start making content online and networking with other former Muslims and people working with NGOs and things like that. So on that podcast, I mentioned one individual who had contacted me within this context, a Saudi Arabian man who was stuck in a third country for quite a while after he had been blackmailed for his atheism. That is Reki, who was, by the way, the very first guest on this podcast, and if you will, one of the first projects that we have worked on together for, I think it was a number of years. We worked on fundraising. We worked on media advocacy. We did some radio appearances to talk about as well. I did some of those in Germany, and around 2022, Reki was able to come to Germany successfully, and long story short, he successfully claimed asylum, and he is now also starting a new life. We're very happy to say. And of course, touching people's lives like that and making a difference and also getting to know people's perspectives who think independently and have been punished for that in their societies really, I think gives us something of a unique perspective, which is the very reason we decided to start this podcast. Of course, I believe even before Benjamin even joined the Atheist Support Network, he's been saving money to help relocate another refugee that we also interviewed on this podcast.
Anas, to be precise.
So check out those episodes. Do you remember which episode? Well, number one is very easy to remember. The other one was, what was it?
Anas isn't the title. That should be good enough. But I guess we're both not quite as active with the Atheist Support Network as we'd like to be now. But I'm working 2 jobs and I'm in a relationship now, and helping Anas out quite directly through that.
Because you're living with him now, right?
Yeah. Yep.
It's wonderful. All of the people we've gotten to know over the years, the people we have interviewed on this podcast. Honestly, it's worth it for the conversations, even if nobody ever listened to this podcast.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, when I was reaching out to Zach about Reki, I was thinking that Reki would have the more interesting story, but I mean, Zach, honestly, has such a deep story too. I mean, knowing he was born in Saudi Arabia is only the tip of the iceberg. So a finite number of people who have Saudi citizenship, but are genetically just as American, as much as that's even a genetic thing, but European American.
I don't have any Native American ancestry as far as I know.
But grandparent who was from the U.S. and culturally seems about as, maybe bilingual, it's hard to judge, but culturally almost as American as Saudi at least. And then also minority within the Russian Empire and Lebanese, which
So
to say nothing of Zach's deep knowledge of politics, linguistics, political ideologies, religions he's never been a member of and never will be.
Yeah, I guess I do have some, even though my more immediate family, as many of you probably know, were very, very religious.
That's almost a parallel between us too, that we have both religious and non-religious sides of our families.
That is interesting.
That have both played a big role in our lives in very different ways.
So it's interesting that we have a similar background like that. I actually didn't know that either of your parents were religious.
And sorry, everyone, we've had too much trouble with the camera. We're giving up. But I'm guessing everyone has seen our lovely faces enough already.
Yep. Tough luck, everyone. No camera, no preparation. Hopefully this is gonna be fun.
Yeah.
So yeah, about the secular jihadists. It was actually not only what kind of introduced us to each other. Ali Rizvi, the host, by the way, is the second to last guest that we have had on this podcast. So he interviewed me around that time, and the Secular Jihadists podcast was also honestly something of an inspiration for this podcast. Because it spoke to and really empowered so many former Muslims and people who have been struggling with those questions of identity for such a long time.
And I like to think we're not going to go off the rails like some of the people on Secular Jihadists did. Herman.
Yep. And well, at least I can promise you that, even if we don't, keep posting consistently or whatever. Yes, I promise you now that this podcast is never going to be a far-right propaganda mill, no matter what happens.
Well, unless you're asking somebody who thinks everything right of communist is far right, but that's a matter for another time.
I'm not a communist, but okay.
You're not a communist? Fascist! Fascist! There are actually people who have said that. I don't mean about us in particular, but everyone who's not a communist also being a fascist.
I know. I've been called a fascist by yes, but
yeah. The only thing less meaningful than being
Stalin, by Stalin admirers, which
the only thing less meaningful than being called a Nazi by a Stalin admiring communist is being called a communist by a Nazi, and I've had them both happen in the same day before.
Which, by the way, I mean, I don't deny this idea or what you're saying about there are crazy communist people, yes, but the entire media ecosystem is operating on a premise that this is kind of a mainstream Democratic Party kind of thing, and that the left is going off the rails when nothing could be further than the truth. You look at the Democratic Party in Congress, in the House and the Senate. They're barely doing anything to resist the fascist regime that is in power right now, and the way I see it, they are little more than controlled opposition, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So this idea of radical Marxists being so ubiquitous in leftist scenes, that they're even worth talking about. In all honesty, I think
Honestly,
that's misleading.
they're
I think
most
that's misleading.
they're most significant as an annoyance online. That's how they're most significant by far.
They're
You don't
most
run into them
significant as
in
an
meat
annoyance
space.
online.
Yeah.
Yeah, but when you say that, that a communist will call you a fascist if you're not a communist, or
I'm talking about them online. I'm not talking about anything they say in person.
Yeah, so it belongs in this category, which I think has been a running theme lately, of phenomena that exist, right, but are not significant at all, or are not remotely significant enough to be held on a level of comparison with the kind of insanity that is happening on the right, right? So.
And
You have people like Bill Maher, people, a lot of people playing this common sense centrist, both sides are crazy kind of thing, right? The Democrats, the leftists, they want communism and they want to globalize the Intifada, and they want to abolish Israel, and so on and so forth, and then the right, they attempted a coup. They openly praise Nazis and white supremacists. They openly encourage and laugh about um, uh, acts of political violence across the country, and it's like, yeah, there are crazies on both sides. No. You can't compare those two by any means, right? One of them is like at the top of government, leading every meaningful institution on the right, and the other one is nothing more than an annoyance on Twitter, and barely have any representation in real life leftist organizations and parties that we have here in Germany, that we have in neighboring European countries, right? You look at Die Linke, for example, here in Germany. They're socialist, yeah. They want to transform the economy, have a democratic socialist system. They have a vision for things, but the kind of extreme Marxist Leninist that so many people are fear mongering about. That is a very, very niche phenomenon.
Yeah, and it's definitely telling that niche left wing phenomenon. They have red brown. They have stunning levels of red brown convergence too. Like that, like the Stalinists will support Russia against Ukraine, and outright Nazis generally support, when they're not in Eastern Europe, support Russia over Ukraine. Then within Eastern Europe, they manage to support Russia for Nazi reasons and fight against Russia for Nazi reasons, which is not exactly the same as fighting Ukraine, but fighting for Ukraine, but is pointing guns in the same direction. This is also a wild thing that's happening in the world now.
Yeah, of course, when you have a war, yeah, kind of like something you mentioned in some Palestinian camps, right? When you're in a war, quite frankly, you don't have the energy to care about who's supporting you. You might have a battalion of Nazis here and a battalion of leftists there, and you try to keep them separate as much as possible, not fighting each other. But
PLO had Jewish communists on opposite sides of a camp with outright neo-Nazis in the 1970s.
So of course we spoke about Reiki. We've spoken about some of the people who used to host the secular jihadists, right? And the kind of conflicts of identity that arise with a lot of former Muslims, even people who don't necessarily identify as ex-Muslim, but have been treated so badly by Arab communities and Muslim communities, in where they came from, that when they actually do have the opportunity to build a life in another society, have a sort of identity crisis, and a lot of difficulty finding their place in the world, which I've also kind of kind of experienced to a certain degree. The other day, I was cooking breakfast. I made like a traditional Middle Eastern type spread, with lentils and hummus, and things like that. And considering that Benjamin is living with a person of Arab heritage, you made a very interesting comment about that, which I have been kind of thinking about ever since, and I think it's a very interesting kind of psychological phenomenon that happens with people like myself, like Anas, like Raki. Tell me what your experience, what you told me at that point when I asked you whether your roommate ever made food like that for you, and what.
So he's still mostly in his Arab stage.
Arab. What does that mean?
Yeah, and I mean, I've seen this quite a few times actually. Somebody mentioned that I had dates for breakfast, and he said, "Ugh, smells like Arabs." Was, of course, somebody who was, as far as we know, fully Arab, except, that he speaks other languages.
And also very crucial, a former Muslim who has been horribly mistreated by.
And it almost sounded like the Arab culture was as big of a factor in it as Islam, but he couldn't answer that question himself, so I'm not going to try to say I know for sure.
For a lot of people, it's those two things are very difficult, if not impossible, to separate.
Sure.
Right. I mean, of course, there are non-Muslim Arab cultures, and especially in Lebanon.
May they continue to exist.
Amen. But yeah, if you're in Saudi Arabia, for example, and this is your native culture, that there's the distinction. It seems like a distinction without a difference, quite honestly, right? So.
Yeah, but I mean, in an African perspective, you can have Muslims like, I hate Arabs are the worst. For reasons that very closely line up to why Native Americans may say, white people are the worst.
Or Kurds, well, that's you hear a lot of that as well, and that's and as another example, I actually have an individual in my family who just pretty much refuses to speak Arabic. At all, and I do have to say I understand that. And well, sometimes I do that during Ramadan, if I'm being completely honest. If I find myself in an interaction with somebody who might be religious and might be asking me if I'm fasting, why I'm not fasting, what I believe, why I believe this or that, I'll just straight up lie and say I don't speak Arabic.
Yeah, and if you really want to go into depth, say, mein Vater is Mexican.
I think I could pass this as Spanish or Italian.
Everyone in the world can pass as Latin American. There is no one in the world, except maybe someone who's an Australian Aborigine. Every other physical, genetic group, other than Australian Aborigines and New Zealanders, are represented in Latin America.
Just if you're gonna lie like that, just don't do it to a Spanish speaker, because that's gonna.
No. You can tell.
You're gonna be caught quite quickly.
Or you can tell them you have two Spanish grandparents, but that your dad didn't teach you the language. You can absolutely do that. Actually, it's a common phenomenon in the U.S. Just people who look, especially if they're like part Native American, look like they're from Latin America and say, I don't speak Spanish, to somebody who is from Latin America, and to get a hostile and very awkward reaction. And they have to explain that, no one in my family tree that I've ever connected with spoke Spanish as a first language, at least.
Yeah. Although, if it's a non-Spanish speaking person, I've been told I can make a pretty good impression of the Spanish language that can be convincing to a non-Spanish speaker that I'm speaking Spanish. But I've also been told it's quite offensive, so I'm not going to do it right now.
And if you're if you're doing a taquilla, it's not offensive, right? Yes, I know taquilla is a Shia thing, not a Muslim thing.
Yeah, it's a Shia thing, and it's not. It's the way that a lot of people on the internet talk about it. It's a complete myth. So the idea of taquilla is essentially just the idea that you're allowed to keep your faith secrets if you fear persecution for your faith, which was very relevant for Shia communities that were surrounded by Sunni rulers and dynasties throughout history. So basically, the idea is that they keep their faith secret so that they are not targeted. That's it. The ideas about misrepresenting the very core tenets of Islam in order to secretly replace the white population in Western countries. That's a completely foreign idea. It's essentially white supremacist conspiracy theory that. Of course, you have some people of Islamic backgrounds, some neo-Nazis of Islamic backgrounds as well, like the apostate prophet, kind of
Are they just
proliferating this kind of idea that taqiyya is a real thing in that specific way, which, by the way, Shia Muslims comprise about 10% of all Muslims, and even within Shia Islam, it is not what white supremacists tend to portray it as. Right. So most Muslims don't even know what it is.
I'm sure any who speak English do now. Sorry, guys. I get that that's a terrible club to be in.
Yeah, and yeah, I mean, if this is your first the first episode you're listening to, you might get the impression that I have a kind of an interest in defending Islam, right? But just watch some of my other content and some of the other episodes that I have been involved in. Criticizing Islam is one of the main things I do on the internet. So.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, and I think
there are big problems here, of course.
And I think one other anecdote, though, to go back to our original conversation about the Arabs. After we got some important paperwork done, Anas and I went to a cafe, ordered drinks, and it turned out that the guys running it were also Syrian. And they talked for a while, and one of them told Anas that, yeah, I could tell as soon as you walked in that you're a Muslim, which, I mean, personally, if someone said, I could tell as soon as I saw you that you're Christian, I would have a bad reaction to that. Uh-huh. If I'd had to flee Christo-fascists killing people for not being Christian and killing people for being the wrong kind of Christian and using bombs in this war, I'd have a very bad reaction, and they probably would have seen, and I probably would show it on the spot in a very obvious way without saying anything, and Anas did not.
What did Anas do?
He just said, yeah, and he told me, well, I got their number, but said, I am going to keep those people at arm's length.
Wait, he gave him his number as well. It's like, you're Muslim and I'll give you my number kind of thing.
Pretty much, but also, like, you're two Syrians in Wisconsin.
Yeah, that's not true.
Who else are you gonna meet? Who else do you know who speaks Arabic?
Well, yeah, that's true. I mean, for me, I guess I've kind of had some of that, especially lived in refugee accommodation, that kind of thing, and I of course don't want to be pressured into participating in things that I don't want to participate in. I don't want to fast during Ramadan. I don't want to be made to pray. I don't.
Yeah.
So it was important to me for a while to keep certain people at an arm's and maybe not necessarily start conversations in Arabic, even if somebody's clearly speaks Arabic, and that kind of thing. It's something that a lot of former Muslims experience. I think one of many kind of realizations that contributed to the turning point um, that I had um, with that is when the war in Ukraine started, and I had a number of Russian acquaintances that, well, people would say, "Oh, I'm sorry that I'm Russian. I'm ashamed to be Russian." It's like, yeah, even meeting new people, where are you from? Oh, I'm ashamed to say that I'm Russian.
Yeah,
and it's like, that's just ridiculous.
yeah,
You didn't do anything. You came from a certain place. You are who you are. Um, I'm sure there are parts of your culture and heritage that are worth appreciating and preserving, right? But it's good to have a critical approach to it as well.
yeah. And
Yeah.
just saying, as an American, I get it. There's no one more sick of American shit than Americans, except of course countries which we've dropped bombs on. But other than those countries, there's no one more sick of American shit than Americans.
Yeah. So like, I love falafel and I will appreciate Arabic poetry, and if I go into a market where where the vendors are Arab and I feel like I might get some advantages by approaching them and speaking to them in Arabic, I will do that. Or even if not, if somebody wants to speak to me in Arabic for whatever reason, I am not I no longer I no longer I'm no longer discreet about where I come from, what my ethnic and cultural background is. Um, I also have a critical relationship with it. I will openly mock um, re- uh, religious ideas. I will openly mock religious ideas, and I will participate in the culture in the way that I see fit. Right, I'm gonna do it my own way, and I'm not gonna tell anyone. I'm gonna do it my own way, and I'm not gonna let anyone dictate how I am to live my life and appreciate my culture and heritage.
Yeah. And I mean, I have an even different relationship to it. Everyone being outside the US, is sick of religiously driven American violence. Well, I tell people every week we're promoting Christian theocracy inside the US, that the country was founded to get away from that. If they want to do it, go somewhere else. And yes, I see the problem with telling people to, if they don't like the US, leave it. But seriously, that's the Constitution's First Amendment was freedom of religion, free exercise of religion, and that it will not be an established religion. You can't get deeper than the First Amendment. If you can't handle the First Amendment, you don't belong in the U.S.
Yeah, I think this whole phenomenon of having an uncertain relationship with your identity, and a lot of the time, of course, people, you have Persians and Kurds and also non-Arab people who have to flee their homes for whatever reasons as well, coming to new countries and wanting to integrate and be part of the society where they are, but also a lot of the time, unfortunately, lacking the education that it takes to effectively take part in a democratic society, and so just like a lot of natives in Germany, especially in the East, where we have had some problems with the integration of some Eastern population groups that unfortunately also didn't have the same access to education and don't have the proper understanding of how a pluralistic democratic society works, and end up kind of being duped by movements that are trying to distract them from the real economic problems that our countries are facing, and creating scapegoats in specifically Muslims and Arabs and foreigners. And so, as a result of all of those factors, and probably a lot more, those people who unfortunately might not have attained the necessary tools to protect themselves from predatory movements like that are often falling victim to neo-fascist agendas. And ironically, in believing the rhetoric around immigration numbers and Islam being an existential threat to European society, they actually become part of the, in my opinion, much more serious existential threat to Western society, which is neo-fascism.
And do we want to go over the history of fascist and neo-fascist immigration freakouts?
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
So I guess the place I'd put it to start the freakouts of a specific white nationalist character, there were a lot of people who complained about Irish and Germans moving into the U.S., and then the Irish and Germans complained about the Italians. But you go a step beyond that, ultimately, I don't know that I know anyone who qualifies as a white Anglo-Saxon Protestant. But when they first started freaking out about people from outside of Europe, it was called the Yellow Peril. Yes, that is exactly as racist as it sounds. It was in the 19th and early 20th century. The idea was that Asians are reproducing more and in quotes, will replace us. And I mean, Confucianism does mandate obligations to your ancestors and your descendants. An obligation to your ancestors is that you have descendants and continue the family line. And adopting to achieve that is perfectly fine. There have been hilarious conflicts of adoptees in the royal line, but that's not too relevant here. And I think what is most telling, every time people get access to good medical care, death rate in small children drops. I think most people would think that is a good thing. So population spikes, land gets expensive, people move to cities, factories build, people working in factories need to pay rent, and they need to pay for their children's food instead of the child helping out in the fields. They need to pay for their education, so they have fewer. Now, the lowest birth rates on Earth are in Asia. So yeah, Yellow Peril. We have not been overrun by Asians. Asians in the U.S. integrate pretty well for the most part. Yeah, people first generation who integrate pretty well. Work hard, all good. And what I think is interesting is there is a horrifying and fascinating guy from Russian history called Ungern von Sternberg, known as the Bloody White Baron. For our German-speaking audience, yes, he was an anti-Semite. Yes, Sternberg is a fairly commonly a Jewish name. No wonder.
Sternberg is also the cheapest beer you can get in Germany.
Yeah. No wonder he was so Ungern, right? For our non-German speakers, Ungern means unhappy and just not good.
Yeah. Gern means I would very much like it. I guess there's no direct translation to English, but Ungern is the opposite.
Yeah, and yes, a vicious, genocidal anti-Semite having a Jewish-sounding name. No wonder he's not happy. He also never seemed to grow up, but he had a very different view of Yellow Peril. He thought it was a good thing. He was into theosophy, which a lot of the esoteric neo-Nazis are and were into. Kind of combined most religions except Judaism. And he could speak pretty proficiently about both Christianity and Buddhism, and he thought Europe being overrun by Asians was a good thing. Yes, that is a German name. He was from Latvia. He also learned to speak Estonian. Took over Mongolia. Fascinating guy. History Impossible did a good episode about him. There's a good book about him called The Bloody White Baron. I recommend them both.
All right, so Sternberg, he was actually pro-immigration, right?
Actually, immigration may not even be the right word. I think he may have been pro-Asians violently invading Europe. He was a nut. He had this weird obsession with military discipline where he would have people pulled apart by trees, and he never appears to have had or wanted to have sex. I think he may not have actually grown up. I think he may not have actually gone through puberty. Wild story.
Which actually quite neatly connects to the Islamophilia that you find in some corners of the far right.
Yeah. And the original Nazis too. Yeah. Original Nazis.
The original Nazis.
So much Islamophilia.
They had a certain measure of Islamophilia as well. Andrew Tate's conversion to Islam is a good example of that as well.
Yeah. There was also this neo-Nazi in Florida where a friend, a female friend, lived a few blocks away from, who suddenly had two neo-Nazi roommates, converted to Islam, and when they did, the neo-Nazi equivalent of what the fuck, he killed them. I know, right?
Wait, say again, your ex converted to Islam?
No, this is a different ex.
Okay.
This was someone who just lived a few blocks from where that crazy scenario happened. It was in Florida that it happened.
Oh yeah. I mean, identitarian movements seem to attract the same type of person. A lot of the European Muslim converts that ended up joining ISIS were apparently also from the skinhead kind of scene.
And ultimately, people with that sort of identitarianism, it's somebody who's insecure about themselves. They find something they did not earn to be proud of. Converting to a religion is not really earning anything either. It's ultimately very similar to becoming an ethno-nationalist.
In identitarianism, I think in Ali Rizvi's book, The Atheist Muslim, the chapter A Tale of Two Identities, it's very well covered. This phenomenon. So from a Islamic as well as a white nationalist perspective, you have mostly young people who are struggling to find their identities, and a lot of the time don't have much future prospects and or accomplishments of their own, or interests that are substantial enough to kind of build an identity around and be proud of, that kind of thing. And of course, people need something to hold on to say, this is who I am, right? But accomplished people don't need things like religion and ethnic identity to know who they are, right? Or for other people to know who they are. Right? If I ask you, who was Einstein?
Brilliant physicist?
Yeah, brilliant physicist. You didn't say Jew, you didn't say German, you didn't say man.
Yeah.
Right? Those things aren't what matters.
Although, if you're looking into his deeper biography, his Jewish background is important because a bunch of his family was killed for it.
Well, yeah, that happens to be a very tragic accident of history, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, indeed.
Right? His being Jewish or not being Jewish is just not that important, and I think serious people who have serious accomplishments don't pay attention to those things, quite honestly, and it is quite tragic that you have disadvantaged people who barely have prospects or accomplishments in life, thinking they can find meaning through identitarian movements like that. I think, yeah, like I mentioned before, people need to be educated, they need to be supported. You need to, build a career, find out, like, every human being has this need to be useful to their community, to do work that is actually meaningful, right? And to be important in some way. It is very tragic when people don't don't get the opportunity for that, when they don't get the opportunity to go to university, when they don't, or learn a trade, or whatever one might be passionate about.
Or if they think being a father, and I mean beyond knocking a woman up, is emasculating.
Being a mother. Right.
Yeah. And I don't know how many women there are who find actually taking care of a child to be emasculating.
That's not what I mean. I'm talking about finding meaning in life. Yeah. I'm talking about, finding something that drives you, when you wake up in the morning, look back on your life. It makes your life meaningful, right? But there are so many things that people can do and be proud of. But if you don't have that, what else do you have? So it is an incredibly tragic situation. I think the way that hopefully we can get out of this mess primarily should be more access to education, more economic equity, more support programs for young people who
and just
don't have direction.
Interact with actual people around you, because a lot of this comes down to people who don't have a real community of real humans around them make an imagined community of a larger group that you can't know. That is ultimately what nationalism is. And what I think is super telling about the Nazis is they had this imagined German community of blonde hair and blue-eyed people. And notably, Hitler and Himmler were neither. And Himmler had Asian-looking eyes. I don't know how else to say it. They're and he was promoting blonde-haired, blue-eyedness as superior. That's should tell us something. I can't tell what, but that is a wild combination, right?
I mean, yeah. There's quite a significant dose of fantasy that goes into this Aryan master race ideology, which stems from early linguistic discoveries and around the turn of the 20th century.
And somehow they weren't quite able to tell that the Slavs, who they looked down upon most, were also more Aryan than Germans. Yeah. It's also hilarious.
So around the turn of the 20th century, linguists were realizing that languages from Norwegian and Swedish, English, German, Italian, to all the way down to Hindi in India and Persian.
South of Hindi. The very southern part of India is mostly non-Indo-European speaking. Yeah. But there's languages south of Hindi that are still
So linguists at the time were discovering that those languages have some striking commonalities, especially in the base vocabulary and the rules of the syntax and things like that, and posited that there was an ancestral language from which all of those languages arose. This is to this day an accepted idea in linguistics, but of course, people who don't understand linguistics or genetics or population movements will take this and run with it and say, well, if there was a Proto-Indo-European language, that means the Germans, or like that we kind of descend from the Proto-Indo-European people. And since, there are so many great cultural accomplishments and traditions and things in India and in Persia and so on, right? It must be the case that the Proto-Indo-Europeans kind of had all of that greatness, which kind of dissipated over different populations over time. It must be that this linguistic evolution has to coincide with genetic evolution as well, like biological evolution. Making a lot of assumptions, of course, that are far from scientific. The idea that of course, the Germans should be descended from those people directly, and every Indo-European speaking people in the same way. That's of course not the case. That the spread of language is the same as the spread of genes, because of course populations can adopt languages. Can adopt languages of more prestigious groups or invaders or that kind of thing.
I have one grandparent who was born to people who spoke English as their first language.
Yep.
And it's the only language I speak terribly well.
And I think a good example that kind of drives this point home is the Mongol. How the Mongol invasions have left a significant genetic footprint on world populations, but the language didn't. Their language had a very minimal influence on those populations at the same time. So that's one problem, and then of course the idea that the Semitic peoples, are distinct from the European peoples, and that everything that is Semitic is kind of stolen, and they can't create something for themselves, and so on and so forth, is of course just based on chauvinistic fantasies and assumptions about who you want to be superior and inferior. Semitic speaking populations were among the first to start civilizations and build structures
and there's a distinct
agriculture and so on.
And there's a distinct possibility that Greeks and Phoenicians might not actually have really been super separate. They're a bunch of gravestones,
right?
Genetically or culturally.
Yeah.
The Athenians and Spartans are both super chauvinistic against other Greeks.
Yeah.
But smaller city-states have gravestones in Greek and Phoenician.
Interestingly enough, Greek is an Indo-European language, but it basically took its alphabet from Phoenician, which was a Semitic language, and Phoenician had taken that from ancient Egyptian.
Yeah, so. and they both put colonies all over the Mediterranean. I suspect they're both similarly shitty to the people who lived there first. And ultimately, the parallels between them are extremely striking, and I think it is ultimately a case of the people most violent against each other being similar people, because the opposite of a violent asshole is somebody who is not a violent asshole, who is going to put up with shit.
Within this context, of course, you will also notice that that the regions that vote for the AfD, for example, and where you have a higher concentration of people who say that there are way too many foreigners and we need to deport more people and they're causing so many problems, and having those worries, first of all, tend to be from underdeveloped communities, and the other thing is, of course, people from other countries are less likely to settle in underdeveloped communities. And as a result, you'll see a very curious, almost exact kind of division in Germany, where a lot of East German regions, or like the East German states in Germany, where the AfD is very popular, are exactly the regions with the least immigrants in the country, right? And the regions that have the most immigrants tend not to see that as much of a problem.
And I mean, I think it's also just telling how many Mexicans in the U.S. are way more pro keeping Central Americans out of the U.S. and out of Mexico, for that matter, than you would initially think for people who have mostly the same genetic background and speak the same language.
What about the Hispanic voting patterns during the last presidential election.
Yeah, well, Trump got more Hispanic votes in the last election than the first time he ran. Honestly, I think there's a lot going behind that. I'm sure. I mean, I don't think the North Koreans are wrong when they called Trump a dotard, but Biden is too. And he suddenly left. That wasn't a good choice. He said he was going to run for one term only. He should have stuck to that, in my opinion. And ultimately, I think one of our biggest problems in the U.S. is the portion of our leaders who wouldn't be allowed to drive a bus. Yeah. And I am sure when everybody currently over the age of 70 in our government has had to either retire because they are unable to remotely function, and I'm sure quite a few are already unable to remotely function or have died, the ultimate no longer being able to function. I am sure our Israel policy will be very different very quickly.
I mean, doesn't everyone love to shit on Joe Biden for being senile during his presidency?
Yeah.
Well,
yeah, you think Trump isn't?
That's totally true.
Yeah.
But Trump is potentially even worse on that front. He's completely clueless as to what's going on around him. The only thing that he has going for him there, I think, is that probably the difference or the decline that he has experienced might not have been as steep because Joe Biden was actually competent at one point.
Yeah. Plus Joe Biden hired competent people, so they're at least competent people giving him decent advice, and they're not afraid to be fired if they disagree with him. The wrong way.
I mean, Trump was not an intelligent person at his peak.
I think he was intelligent, but not directing it towards the way most people would. I think he was directing his intelligence to manipulate people to get their money, for one, and also their adoration. I do not think a normal person wants the amount of adoration he does. And I think he was ultimately a narcissist whose IQ may be reasonably high, not that IQ is a very good measure, and was able to use his intelligence to get adoration instead of to be a functional human being. And so much of his business was just putting his name on stuff. It's like a dog peeing on fire hydrants. Yeah. Not that they haven't described a lot of human behaviors as like a dog peeing on fire hydrants, but you get my point. Most people don't do it with their name in giant gold letters.
Yeah.
But back to migration, though. There's been a lot of panic about Hispanic migration into the U.S. In the mid-20th century to now. You may note that Texas, California, and the states between, and some states to the north of those, used to be part of Mexico. That freakout is a little hypocritical in that light. They're saying that people from there will replace us. Somehow a mix of Catholics and Protestants coming to join the U.S. into the U.S. that is not changing the religious balance. They go to the same churches. There are quite a lot of movements of Hispanic people converting from Catholicism to Protestantism of one kind or another. Actually, not generally the versions of Protestantism that I like being around the most, even. But ultimately, they are not really going to be pushing a lot of laws. Maybe homophobia in Hispanic communities is a little more likely to be of the gangster variety than the theocrat variety. Have we talked about that on the podcast before, Zach?
The different categories of homophobia?
Yeah.
Don't think so. I don't think we need to go into it right now.
Don't need to go in depth, but theocrat, it's against the God's law. Therefore, any homosexuality is bad. Gangster, being in the receptive role of sex is being like a woman. Being like a woman is bad. Therefore, being the receptive partner in homosexual sex is demeaning. Gangsters, gangsters are well known for that. Don't think we need to explain that further. But other than that, largely they fit in pretty well. And birth rates in Latin America, they were high. They've lowered. If you look at different Latin American countries, they've lowered in interesting ways. They've lowered significantly. Mexico is industrialized. They're actually running out of factory workers. NAFTA, just if Trump doesn't ruin that, just increases the need for factory workers in Mexico. But Guatemala and Honduras still have birth rates around 3. Most of the rest of Central America is around 2. I think what's very telling that in El Salvador, the birth rate is just barely above 2, and there was a time not that long ago when the president of El Salvador said, "Be a patriot, kill a priest." I don't approve of murdering priests, but that sure tells. But when the president is saying that, yeah, people might not be following the Catholic Church's no contraceptive mandates, and the Catholic Church inside the U.S. has done that too. Most Americans ignore it. Most Hispanic people will ignore it. Climate may drive more people out of Latin America. Ultimately, Americans complaining about that are hypocrites. Where do you think the carbon dioxide came from, if not us? And, China's contributing now. Europe's played their part. It's still, we need to help people we have harmed. And increasingly, a lot of the far right is embracing Catholicism, and Catholics are not embracing them back. The current pope is born in the U.S. from Chicago. Chicago sports fans. Spent a lot of time in Latin America. He is not.
I mean, the vice president is Catholic, and he killed the last pope, right?
Yes. Actually, I think he's a convert to Catholicism too. It's funny. He's also married to a Hindu woman. And I have so many questions I don't think we'll ever get answers to about that. And this is another thing. How many far-right people marry Indians or Hispanic people? It is bizarre, but like we said before, as insecure people fall for ethno-nationalism. Well, what could you be more insecure about than your partner being better than you? If you're in a relationship with somebody of a lesser race, well, all of a sudden you're not the lesser partner. I don't imagine most of these are healthy relationships on either side, though.
No.
Yeah.
Most definitely not.
Yeah.
It's especially when you're undermining your partner and speaking about them in ways that are simply inappropriate.
Yeah.
When J.D. Vance speaks about his wishes to that his partner would change her religion and things like that.
And I almost wonder.
It's not something you say in public.
Yeah.
Even if you think.
And I almost wonder if they have an understanding that he has to say that for his political career, and that he doesn't actually mean it. That's why they're still together. I almost wonder if that's going on too.
Could be. I mean, at least Fido, the leader of the AFD, who was married to a woman, apparently was left by her wife. Now we don't know exactly why that was. There is a lot of speculation that the kind of rhetoric she's been involved in might have played a role. And of course, her wife was Sri Lankan.
Yeah, and maybe her wife just says, "I refuse to beg to be long knifed. I'm out."
Possibly. I mean, I wonder if that's going to happen with Vance as well.
Well, we ultimately won't know if they'll get divorced until they get divorced. But yeah. And for all we know, Vance is playing some 3D chess that's ultimately about getting himself money, not about actually holding a lot of political power. I mean, he certainly went into tech because he was told that's the future where you'll get money. If you wanted solely political power, staying in the laws would probably have been a better option. Yeah.
I mean, I've been looking at J.D. Vance's story and his background and how and the inconsistencies that often come up with his growing up with a drug addicted mother and all that, and having very little opportunity as a child, then going to Harvard, meeting Peter Thiel, and basically being groomed by him to join politics and that kind of thing. I don't know how much of the official narrative about his life I believe, and do you think J.D. Vance might have been grown in a lab by Peter Thiel, just to kind of, just as a kind of a puppet for a ghoul with zero charisma? To
almost could have been
control over the country.
But he has so little charisma himself.
No, J.D. Vance has charisma.
Yeah.
I disagree with you on that. J.D. Vance is charismatic, he's intelligent, he's competent, and that is what makes him so terrifying.
Yeah. Well, I guess. But is this something about him that accusing him of doing inappropriate things to a couch work because he comes across as a sort of person who might do inappropriate things to the couch? And I mean, realistically, that's not actually that weird of a thing to do, but still.
Speak for yourself.
I mean, not that I've ever done it, but people have written in the Dan Savage about how they've gotten into it. It's as far as ways to masturbate, there's plenty of. It's not as freaky as choking yourself, for example.
No kink shaming here.
I don't
feel offended.
I don't kink.
I feel personally attacked by that.
I don't kink shame. I risk death that's going to hurt everyone who loves you. Shame. That is what I'm shaming there. I'm not shaming a kink. I'm shaming putting yourself at that risk and hurting everyone who loves you. But anyway, yeah, how the Catholic Church fits into this is an interesting, complicated story. Catholic Church seeks to be universal. That puts real limits on how much ethno-nationalism can fly under their banner, which ultimately is a good thing. And really, Catholic doctrine fits in neither party. Being anti-abortion does not fit into the Democratic Party. It is a bedrock part of the party that you do not stop women from getting abortions. The social welfare mandates of the Catholic Church don't fit in the Republican Party either. So they're going to have an interesting future there. And
the Catholic Church, to their credit, they have made some very, very serious mistakes the last time fascism went mainstream. And they made deals with Hitler to basically let him do whatever he wants. They would stay out of it, and so on. I think the only Nazi leader who was ever excommunicated was excommunicated for marrying a divorced woman. So that should tell you that they just how hands off and just how in many ways complicit they even were. If you look at the the references to God with the Nazis, the fact that Hitler himself was a Catholic, Mussolini was a Catholic.
Nazis were a much bigger tent about religion than you'd initially think too. Islamophilia, Hinduphilia, the neo-pagans, and I mean like not just like they're in neo-Nazis, like General Ludendorff was a neo-pagan when he was in the beer hall pooch next to Hitler.
It's all very complex. Certainly Mussolini and Franco were much more connected to Catholicism than Hitler.
And it should be lost. We shouldn't miss out that a lot of the Catholic Church's collaboration with fascists was also motivated by fear of reprisals if they didn't. It's my understanding that a large number of Poles, Catholic and Jewish, were literally held hostage, and the Pope was told, if you don't cooperate, we will kill them. This is not necessarily the same level of collaboration.
I'm actually not super familiar with that details. From or deny anything you said here. The point is, the Catholic Church before and during the Second World War has made some very, very serious mistakes that many people would say are absolutely unforgivable. And now the Catholic Church is taking a stand for what is right, and they still have a lot of problems. I'm still not a fan of the Catholic Church, right? But I think we should acknowledge credit where credit is due. Pope Leo has been doing a great job of taking responsibility for this specific issue and doing his part in at least not being complicit the atrocities that are taking place at the hands of fascists like Trump and Noam in the United States and similar movements across the Western world.
Yeah, and something that should not also be lost on these conversations. There are a lot of fascists organizing as traditional Catholics trying to fly under Crusader banner, and no one is more irritated by those people than so-called crib Catholics, people born in the Catholic Church. Let's not forget that either, because, well, anytime these people convert to another religion, to another religious group or ethnic group, the people who are already in it are annoyed. See also Zoroastrians in Iran who don't particularly like Persian nationalists trying to join them. I imagine both because these are fundamentally irritating people who want to join a group, not because they believe its tenets, but for nationalist reasons. And for Zoroastrians in Iran, that is putting them at risk. That if Muslims are converting to Zoroastrianism, that puts a target on Zoroastrians. There are Christians in Iran who have the same experience. Yeah. But that is a minor point for our larger migration discussion. The last great freak-out-inducing migration and population expansion is going on now. It is Islamic migration. I think this would also cover migration of Africans who are not Muslims. It largely triggers the same response. We can probably psychoanalyze that a lot, but do you really want to psychoanalyze that much right now? I don't.
I mean, yeah, I don't think there's much deep thought around it, but yeah, I think it just comes down to fear of the unknown, right? It's not that complicated, and
and the Arab and Muslim worlds have a much higher birth rate than the West. It has dropped because people moved out of countryside, stopped farming, started living in cities and working in factories. But there is, well, not quite like Confucianism, where it's an obligation of your ancestors to leave descendants, but a strong encouragement within Islam to reproduce.
As is in most religions, I think.
And certainly not quite like Mormonism, where there's an obligation to have as many children as you can afford to have. No secrets what's going on there. That's clearly Joseph Smith trying to expand his religion by putting it into the religious DNA.
No, in Islam, you expand the religion by waging and invading people's countries, and then telling them that they might get tax relief if they become Muslim. That's how you do it. Not by outbreeding people. That's such a beta way to to do demographic change.
Yeah, and let's not forget there was a time when Joseph Smith said the Al-Quran or the sword. That, well, addition to telling us that he doesn't understand how Arabic works.
The Al-Quran.
Yes.
You're using two definite articles. Okay.
But yes, there is an obligation within Islam or encouragement to reproduce. And birth rates may have gone down. They're still there. I have encountered keyboard jihadis saying, we're going to outbreed you.
Whether those people are real keyboard jihadis or Putin-run troll farms is on a different
and I almost
consideration.
Or Hindutva run troll farms. I would not put it past Hindutva to find fake keyboard jihadis. Hiring the right Indians to be bots is incredibly easy.
Yeah, and of course you have sometimes migrants who have children who end up radicalized, especially if they're disadvantaged and have those identity struggles that we've talked about, and end up being even more radical than their parents and horrifying their parents with that kind of thing. But that's not the typical kind of development that happens. Typically, what you see is that generation for generation, like immigrant populations are more likely to assimilate and become less religious.
And
of course, there are some exceptions that have very specific kind of reasons. Right. But that is how it generally works, and it works the same way with birth rates, by the way.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
in some parts of the world, birth rates are much higher than in Europe, and first generation immigrants are going to have more children on average as soon as the second generation is of age to have children. You see that that the rates are actually not very different from that of anyone else.
Yeah, and the economics of living in a city will assert themselves inevitably in all contexts. The only exception I can actually think of is rich people in New York. I hear rich people in New York now show status signs by having a bunch of children, which is insane. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't have ever imagined that. And I'm not like immigrants from Muslim countries, like maybe even WASPy people in New York. I don't know. I've only ever driven through New York.
I haven't actually spent time in New York City.
I drove through it. Does that count? Took off on my plane to Peace Corps, left from New York. Does that count? But no, I've never actually stopped in New York City, surprisingly.
That is surprising.
I drove through it on my way to Boston to go to a podcasting conference.
Oh, nice.
But anyway, But, I mean, on one hand, I don't know that many people in the U.S. fundamentally think somebody having 100 years from now, having Mexican parents now, or Mexican origin parents now, will really be that different of an American from an Irish American than a German American will be at the same time, in as much as people are going to go by anything but their last name for that, for that kind of thing in 100 years. Goodness knows, if I have children and I have 4 different national origins, I doubt they're going to care about anything but the name.
Yeah, I mean, what does white even mean?
Yeah. Zach could pass him off as Black Irish if he wanted to. But when the migrants are following another religion, funnily enough, the people most at risk from Islamist violence, who are not themselves of Muslim background, are the same people at risk for extremist Christian violence. Mm-hmm. Should be lost on no one too. And oh boy, I am so sick of hearing Christo-fascists complaining about Islamic oppression of gay people. That is the most obvious crocodile tears imaginable.
Yeah, or people who are like, oh, you're against bombing civilians in Gaza. Just do you know how they treat gay people though? They throw them off rooftops.
Yeah. And don't get me wrong, that's an argument against supporting Hamas. That's an argument against aligning with the Islamic Republic of Iran. That is not an argument for bombing random Palestinians who did not, in fact, choose to have Hamas be in charge of them. Even more so considering what happens in the West Bank, which is wild how little discussion what happens in the West Bank gets among people trying to save Gaza.
I don't think the gay people being bombed should be thankful about being liberated. By having their younger siblings and family members being starved to death and brutally killed.
Yeah.
So.
Sure, if there is an actual drive to replace people, or at least not necessarily going with the replacement, just an Islamic drive to have larger families, that'll change things. Hopefully Muslims in the West in 100 years are just like Christians. Hopefully even less extreme than some American Christians are now. And in 100 years, I think there's a good chance of that. And goodness knows, fundamentally...
I mean, in America, maybe you have a few fundamentalist Muslims who are quite scary, but really, if you look at the numbers and who really has the political power and who's able to change things, right? The Christian equivalent of the jihadis are far more dangerous, or much more of an existential threat to the traditional American way of life, to democratic ideals, which of course people like Peter Thiel very openly reject, right? And Donald Trump for that matter. Speaking about the traditional ideals of America, of the West, since the Enlightenment, and even more so since the Second World War, where Western identity, in large part, has been built around democratic values, pluralism, tolerance, and other things like capitalism and all and secularism to a certain degree. I think it's interesting to ask the question now. So, which party in the United States is more conservative, the Democratic or Republican Party?
Now, to mention that, yes, the Democratic Party is more in line with the traditions from the post-World War II.
Not only then, even even from the American Revolution, the idea of the sovereignty of the people, right? Yeah. The idea that people, people are the ultimate sovereign. That democracy is actually a good thing. That that the government should not have a religion. That laws should not be passed in respect of a religion. That all people of all religions should be able to freely practice their faiths.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Those are ideas that go way back to the not only post-World War II, to the American Revolution, even further back to the Enlightenment. Yeah. And so, if we want to talk about traditional Western values, at least if we're looking at the past 300 years of history, those are traditional Western values. Right now, if you want to go back to the Dark Ages and the Inquisition and the witch trials,
and the witch trials were not Catholic, by the way, not until after Protestants started doing it first. I think is also significant.
And the Crusades, that kind of thing. You want to consider those more reflective of traditional Western values. Okay, good luck, but I mean, those are phenomena that existed so far back in history that anything you create now is going to be very different. You're just not going to bring those structures back. Not to mention the fact that most of those the people advocating for that kind of thing are not even Catholic. So. So the past that you are imagining, that you want to those glorious good old days that you want to bring back, they were never actually there. They never existed. They're entirely imaginary.
Except in one way, one big way. I would say Hexeth is exactly like a crusader of old, a pirate wrapped in religious clothing, who acts like a pirate and knows exactly as much about Christianity or anything else as you would expect a pirate to, and then probably being unfair to the actual pirates in the 1700s.
Yep, didn't he recently quote a line from Pulp Fiction thinking it was a Bible verse?
Not didn't. You know he did. We watched Pulp Fiction because he did. But yes, he
we watched Pulp Fiction a few days ago because he did.
Yeah.
I was posing a rhetorical question then, so that people who weren't with us might understand what we're talking about.
It's been a great time being with Zach, though, so I'll say that.
So this past that the neo-fascists are craving is not something that ever existed. And yes, of course you have communists, you have anarchists, you have all kinds of leftists who do have revolutionary ideas about different things, right? They want to abolish capitalism, they want to create new structures, but that is not what is represented by the Democratic Party on the leadership level, right? The leaders of the Democratic Party are the most conservative people in America.
Yeah. We'll see how long that lasts when the gerontocracy goes to their hopefully respectable graves and nursing homes.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm not a conservative. Yes. I don't want to be supporting conservatives, but the alternative is just so much more horrifying.
Yeah.
Right. That
Yeah.
if I was an American, and I think in your position, I wouldn't blame you at all for standing with the Democratic Party to.
Yeah, and ultimately, both parties take their money from mostly the same places. They both have to spend, every member of Congress has to spend hours a day in a room that, frankly, is not the standard you expect somebody who's in Congress to be hanging out in, calling people for multi-$1,000 donations. They spend more time talking to people who can drop 5 figures on politics than they do anyone they actually should be talking to. Doesn't matter which party you vote, that's going to be there. But yeah, and one other big thing I think we should note about all religious groups going on that encourage high birth rates, they have their worst enemy of the lot of them is math. Earth is not growing. Human populations cannot grow indefinitely. Hopefully the Catholic Church will recognize that because, they have a long history of doing very good astronomical math. The fact that the Earth is not growing should not be lost on them, right? Right?
Well, they did burn Giordano Bruno for doing the math, so.
Nah, it wasn't for him doing the math. It was for him saying the universe might be infinite. That's even worse in light of that. He was saying that there might be civilizations on other planets. That implies we have potential growth by going to other planets.
So,
yeah, that too. But yes, Earth not growing. I mean, at the last time I checked, humanity would equal the Earth's mass in 2,700 years. I suspect, thanks to COVID, it's longer now. And in 1970, it was only 1,000 years. But, progress has been made significantly in 50 years. I suspect the next 50 will even it out. We just have to worry about people who actually think you can take over the world religiously by restricting birth control, throwing a spanner in that works, and simultaneously, the Musks of the world throwing a spanner in the works. He has 14 children.
Yep. Speaking about Elon Musk, the fact that people like that can accumulate so much wealth that they can literally buy elections, and they can literally buy the world's most widespread and used social media platform to spread their own political agenda and have their agenda be basically everyone's agenda, and manipulate people's social media feeds such that this kind of far-right ideology has become acceptable in polite society. Right, the fact that individuals can have that kind of capacity, right, is one of many things that day by day is leading me to a more solid conviction that perhaps capitalism and democracy might not be compatible.
Yeah. And I actually take a longer view. I think that fundamentally our problem with having a democratic society goes back to as soon as somebody wanted work done, didn't want to do it themselves, and didn't want to do some sort of reciprocal trade with somebody, i.e., I dig your fish pond, you plow my field type deal. And we've just had to find social structures to allow that, and sure, democracy helped that, but what came before capitalism, the guild system, that was anything but democratic. That was gangsterism under a fancy title with the consent of the church and the nobility.
Yeah, I guess it was rather complex. Yeah. A bit complex considering the different industries and well, I guess they're not equivalent to trade unions nowadays, but they to some degree serve that function for artisans, right?
I mean, more often. I mean, Tides of History did a pretty good series on it. The Brewing Guild actually helped move brewing beer from being a women's job to a men's job only field. Which, I mean, was not great, but it's also that owners of bakeries or whatever would band together, would stop anyone else from making a bakery, and then they would force wages down. They would set the wages, and then they would keep the prices high. It's ultimately squeezing everyone who didn't own a bakery, blacksmith shop, whatever. And the nobility signed off because they funded the administration of the city that way. So it was ultimately it was a regressive tax on the poorest, funding all these cities. The London mayor was chosen by the guild leaders. Kind of tells you everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, but ultimately, what I think we should most cover as far as migration, ethnicity, the people who scream about the white replacement most are also quite responsible for birth rates among white people going down. Red pillars, alpha bros, they treat taking care of a child as emasculating. That disincentivizes having a child. What woman really dreams of having a romantic partner who is going to be gone most of the time and will spend all his time playing video games while he is at home? That's being a single parent just with a little extra income. That no one wants that. And really treating parenthood as emasculating. Well, no kidding, they're not having children. One of the more recent episodes of Ukraine Without Hype, the question episode, actually covered this. It is a fundamental part of masculinity to most Ukrainians that they start a family. It cuts down on misogyny. You need a woman to participate in that. And the Western far right mostly hates women. Go figure. Most women don't dream of being in a relationship with somebody who hates their entire gender. No wonder singleness seems better. And it should also be lost on no one that the societies with the highest birth rates are also the ones where men determine how many children will be born and women do all the work with them. A lot of African societies are unfortunately like that. I'm sure colonialism played a role. If nothing else, the slave trade sucking men out at a much higher rate than women, plus the impossible to estimate, but definitely high number of men who died in the wars that were fought solely to take human beings and trade them for guns. Yeah, that changed gender ratios. That's why polygamy was so common. Go figure. That a man who has 3 wives cannot do his fair share of childcare. If you're assuming each parent to do an equal amount, it's a mathematical inevitability.
Sure.
So, yeah, right wing. Your ancestors created this problem 500 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, in an economy where women have to work just as hard, it just ends up in unrealistic expectations that a lot of women are quite terrified of ever finding themselves in that position.
Yeah, and I mean, just also the hatred of single mothers that comes from the right wing. What do you want now? It's a problem of their own creation that they're screaming about to such an extent. That Ukrainians, and I'm sure most people from east of the Iron Curtain, don't trust the ideological people. I'm sure that's actually proven a defense against this kind of thing.
Yeah.
Which Romeo Kokrowski talked about on our podcast.
Definitely it's a very interesting political topology. There's skepticism of political ideologies and a different way of doing politics in the post-Soviet world. Listen to our episode for Romeo. Listen to our episode with Romeo to learn more about that. And I don't think this is the topic for right now, but it's certainly a very interesting topology that you don't really see in many other parts of the world.
Yeah, but it is absolutely hilarious that we've gone to right wingers fetishizing people who lived under communism as kind of noble savages untainted by feminism.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of contradictions, a lot of interesting phenomena to observe with those things. I think especially interesting is the simultaneous thriving of Islamophobia and Islamophilia at the same time, and right.
Yeah, and I mean neo-Nazis calling for white Sharia. Yeah, they're using Islamic terms for the sort of culture they want, which admittedly I don't think don't marry anyone of another race is anywhere in Sharia, the real one. But that would be like the first part of white Sharia for these people, right?
Yeah. And ultimately, if immigrants are coming into communities that themselves weren't able to integrate and embrace liberal values, as is unfortunately the case in some parts of Eastern Germany, since the reunification, after of course it was, a Soviet vassal state for quite a while. That certainly doesn't help in gaining a new perspective to those things that helps them view the world beyond primitive concepts of tribe and nation, and look beyond that into a broader sense of human solidarity and a society that can be pluralistic instead of totalitarian, that can be multicultural, that can have all of this variety without without compromising on the native culture, on German culture, on British culture,
and for American culture, it's always changed. There's always been new components being brought by new people. It was brought over, and I think one final quote I heard that was like interesting to this was in a show that I just watched with my girlfriend. Called 1883, is a prequel to the show Yellowstone. The main point of view character was a young woman. Her family was moving from Tennessee to Oregon. She said, when you go to a new place, when you flee to a new place, you will not find freedom by bringing the mentality of the place you left. And she kind of tried to join the Native American tribe, the Cheyenne. I'll avoid spoilers, but that is. Should have told the Puritans that. They're bringing the mentality of everyone must follow the same religion to the Americas, and didn't work out too well for them, I don't think. When they fought wars with Native Americans, the prisoners didn't want to go back to the Puritans.
And in that line of thought, I think, to be fair, it's definitely worth saying that this most certainly applies to fundamentalist Muslims who come to Europe.
Yeah.
You guys need to either adapt or leave. Right. There is a reason why the Islamic world is, in large part, not suitable for human habitation. However, I think it is also important to look at the statistical population based reality, and the trends as they actually are, and what we can statistically expect based on real data instead of blind fear. And at the same time, keep in mind the thought that no, they actually don't have the numbers or the institutional power to replace native cultures, or to invade or to subjugate the federal government here in Germany, or what else might you have there? Right. Yes, Islamists cause problems. Commit terrorist attacks. They hurt people. But I think if we diagnose the problem accurately, we are much more likely to reach actual solutions than going about it in a way that is completely delusional, as our society seem to have been doing up until this point.
Yeah, and I mean, and I'm going to call it now. Should the U.S. enter a civil war and have a refugee flow out in the U.S., there will be Americans killing each other after they fled to other countries, because there will be people who have done exactly what was said in 1883 not to do, of taking your old mentality with you. There will be Trumpies who will go to Europe and will continue to be Trumpies, and they will clash with other Americans. And they will have zero idea about how they created the problem they're in. I don't know who will throw the first punch. There will be American on American violence after they've left. And and I mean, yes, gay people in the West being killed by Islamists who've come over claiming to be refugees. That's unacceptable. It is not a common thing. I'm honestly more afraid of Christo-fascists fleeing the U.S. and not realizing how, first of all, how their beliefs were un-American in the first place, and second of all, how they're going to a place where people disagree, and they're going to that place because people disagree with them, because it makes it a better place. And they're going to continue to try to do exactly what they've been accusing Muslims of doing for 2 decades now.
And you can also go back to a YouTube video about the Magdeburg terrorist attack that happened a couple of years ago, which involved a Saudi Arabian doctor who has been living here since 2006. He was an atheist. He was targeted for his views. Right, he worked here in Germany for a very long time, and he was a far-right delusional lunatic who thought he can save Germany with the help of the AfD. Who was also an AfD fanatic, by the way. He thought that Europe was being Islamized. And this ideology was what ultimately drove him. This is one attack that is somewhat adjacent to my life. Another one, of course, when I was in Halle in 2019, there was also far right white supremacist who went there to commit a massacre at a synagogue. When he was able to enter the synagogue, he went into a dinner shop and shot up a bunch of immigrants. Point is that the landscape of all of this is incredibly complex. You have far-right Islamists, you have far-right Christian nationalists, white nationalists. They're all dangerous. Some of them have more institutional powers than others, and I think that's worth focusing on. But of course, I do not want an Islamist or a white supremacist or any of those people as a neighbor, for example.
And I mean, if I have the equivalent...
Those people do not belong in a civilized society, period.
Yeah. And I mean, seriously, if I have to flee the U.S. and have the equivalent experience to what Anas did, my head is going to explode. The U.S. falls into a civil war. Please keep the people who want to fight a religious war there. If you keep it to a small part of the U.S., even better.
Though I don't think, in all honesty, that Muslim as a broad category and Christo-fascist as a more narrow category are comparable in that sense.
Okay, to Christo-fascists, Christian and Christo-fascist are the same thing. They do not consider non-Christo-fascist Christians to actually be Christians.
Well, true, Islamists don't consider non-Islamists to be Muslims either.
Exactly.
But also, a lot of self-identifying Muslims are not Muslims. So.
Yeah. I mean, it's not like Anas was able to interrogate them on exactly what they meant by Muslim. Frankly, that wouldn't be safe. And that's actually one bit of privilege you have as somebody of an ex-Muslim origin in Europe instead of the U.S. I don't know if it's still this way, but for a lot of ex-Muslims in the U.S., everyone, if they're Yemeni, every Yemeni within 3 states of them knows about them.
Interesting.
Yeah. I heard
certainly
that.
not like
Yeah.
that over here. We
Yeah.
have enough,
Yeah.
enough Muslims and Arabs that,
Yeah.
they're not that bad. We don't all know each other, of course.
Yeah. But I mean, would it be? Could it? And I mean, I'm not saying every Muslim knows. I'm saying every Yemeni knows about a Yemeni ex-Muslim.
Yeah.
Would even that happen here?
No, probably not. Even though I'm not secretive about it, I guess I choose my own friends, and of course I have friends that have Arab heritage as well. But yeah, it's not a deciding factor. It's not a community building kind of thing. I mean, my friend group is very multi-ethnic, very diverse, and I simply do not care what kind of religion or culture, whatever, somebody comes from. I think there are more important things about a person to appreciate.
And I mean, I'm specifically referring to one of the early episodes of Secular Sexuality, when two ex-Muslim women were interviewed. They were close friends because, who could understand their positions better than each other? One of them was also a lesbian, although would have sex with men because that was still physically enjoyable. And one of them also mentioned that every Yemeni within 3 states knows about her. So, yeah. Luckily, Americans, no matter what, will not know about each other like that, so I will be safe. Not that I'm in that specific danger in the first place under any circumstances, but Americans will not be that tight-knit if we have to flee in large numbers.
Yeah. I mean, depending on the country, but in Germany, well, they're not now. We have enough Americans here that they don't all know each other.
Yeah, and just that we don't have that Arab tribal culture.
Sure. I mean, Yemen is a very, probably the most tribal Arab culture there is. So even more so than other Arab cultures.
Yeah, and they kind of have to be. It's a hard place to survive in, and they kind of have to rely on your extended kin group to survive in a place as harsh as Yemen, with neighbors as assholy as Yemen's neighbors too. No, I do not mean Oman when I say that.
Yeah, so going back to the idea of conservatism and what I was talking about before, would you say you're a conservative then? And that, since we talked about it.
You're talking about I'm very conservative about the First Amendment in particular, and not so much the Second, but I am very conservative about following the Constitution, with relatively minor quibbles, mostly about the Second Amendment being an individual mandate to have large guns. But otherwise, yes, still do believe in the Constitution. I still believe it is how we should run our country. There's actually a lot of people to the right of me who think that following the Founding Fathers is a fool's errand, although I do also recognize slavery was a mistake. And everything any slaveholder said at the time needs to be taken with that context. But we also need to keep in mind that they expected slavery to disappear because it would be economically unviable. And in all honesty, then, compared to me, you are something of a conservative. I think I can say I'm realistic, leftist than you are, and I feel like sometimes I get the feeling that there's very deep-rooted McCarthyism and Red Scare ideology in you. I mean, it's less that I'm afraid. Days ago, we were walking by an apartment building, and you saw an Antifa flag next to a rainbow flag, and you were somehow under the impression that was a contradiction. Slight contradiction, partial contradiction.
I kind of got really triggered by that, in all honesty. But, and do you want to go over the brief argument we had over that specific? Yeah, realistically, my quibble is less to do with anti-fascists as a movement than the preponderance of Stalin fans in it.
Stalin himself was super homophobic and quite sexist. And I guess you can make a meta point that women's rights in the Soviet Union, the problem is men were deciding what women's rights should be. They thought they should have more rights than they had in Russia before the revolution, and then thought what they put in place was fine. So women's rights were static there. And gay rights, of course, follow women's rights very closely. But it's just, I'm not afraid of what communists will do. I'm afraid of what tankies in particular would do if they could. I don't think they ever will be able to.
Yeah, I mean, earlier in this episode, there was also a similar kind of part of this discussion where, we talked about this, and
that fear in me,
you talk about communists sometimes as though it is a serious threat. To talk about almost in the same way that the far right is a serious threat to Western civilization, which like I said, there are crazy communists, and I am both a liberal and a leftist, which I think a lot of leftists wouldn't say. Just an interesting aside on that. This kind of stance is essentially where the term libertarian originally came from, before it was basically stolen by
anarcho-capitalists,
right-wing idiots who make up terms that don't mean anything. Yeah, anarcho-capitalists. What the fuck does that mean? Right. I mean, I think I've talked about something like that briefly on another episode, but just to illustrate the point, imagine like there is a giant apartment complex that may have 10 apartment buildings with hundreds of people living there. There are thousands of people who are involved in building it. There's so many contractors. There's state services and different like thousands of people kind of also working on the supplying it with water and electricity and maintenance and so on, right? And now if you want to say this apartment complex is mine, who says it's yours, right?
And ultimately there's laws regulating how you run it. If you have laws about how safe this apartment building is, there's something wrong with you.
Here's my point though. Like, who says it's yours? The state says it's yours. This is how capitalism works. And if the state didn't exist, then of course it can't be yours. And so the fundamental kind of ideas behind streams of thought that are critical of the state as a concept. Being critical of the state fundamentally entails rejection of private property as a concept, because private property is a function of the state, right? And so you say you're an anarcho-capitalist or libertarian capitalist. That actually doesn't mean anything. That is just a distraction that right-wing ideologues, like very prominently Peter Thiel, use in large part to obfuscate the meaning behind a lot of things that people on the left are saying, right? So in that sense, and very narrowly, and of course without explaining it very thoroughly, I would never identify myself as a libertarian, because of course so many people understand that term as being connected with figures like Ayn Rand and so on, right? But I mean, if you take it in its original and logically consistent kind of meaning, you could say I'm something of a libertarian.
Yeah, and to be clear, my anti-tankiness does not come from being an American. It comes from being someone of Czech ancestry with Ukrainian family, both and interest in Eastern Europe, all of which were heavily oppressed by Stalin, and in the case of Ukrainians, Stalin tried to starve them out of existence. So it's not because I agree with McCarthy, it's because I think anyone who supports Stalin is ultimately... And he invaded Poland with Hitler! Like, people call...
On that we can agree then.
Yeah. Let's
end the episode on a point of agreement.
Yes.
Yeah. Unless you have an important thing to say. To wrap up the episode. Yeah. Well, I think this is a good point too.
And something we talked about earlier, something Dan Carlin actually mentioned on an episode he recorded years ago, but they listened to last week. From the perspective of a 200,000-year-old person, every ethnicity in the world is a passing fad. It replaced a passing fad. It will be replaced by another passing fad. If all migration from across continents stops tomorrow, every ethnicity is still a passing fad. It will be replaced by an unrecognizable ethnicity that comes from the womb of where it already is. I don't think... maybe the place the Native Americans, my ancestors, wasn't ultimately that good of a thing. I do not think the existence of modern-day Czechs and what used to be Boii territory, that is where the name Bohemia comes from, a Celtic tribe that lived there in Roman times, I do not think that was ultimately a tragedy, although what the Romans did to the Celts was. I do not think the existence of my paternal ancestors was a tragedy. I do not think whoever will live there in another 5,000 years will be a tragedy either. They will be unrecognizable no matter what. Just as everyone else will be replaced by something different. Humanity will change, but the things that make us human will remain the same.
Culture is constant... culture is constantly changing. Language is constantly changing. Any educated person has no reason to be afraid of any of that. With that, take care, everyone. Have a wonderful day. Have a wonderful night. Thank you so much for listening. This has been wonderful being with Ben here personally. I hope we can do it again, hopefully soon.
Yeah. Maybe in Canada next time.
Hopefully.
Even better in the US, because that'll mean that Zach doesn't have to be afraid to go there.
I would not go there right now. Hopefully things change. But in any case, take care, everyone. Thank you so much for listening. Have a wonderful day or night. Take care of yourself. Do consider supporting us on Patreon, making a one-time donation on PayPal. Half of the proceedings are going to go directly to helping a refugee in need, and helping them to build a new life and get to a safer place. So the links are of course in the show notes and in the description. So if you're interested in doing that, we would really appreciate it. Otherwise, you can like the video on YouTube, subscribe on your favorite podcatcher. You can share our content. That would be much appreciated. And stay safe, everyone. Take care and goodbye.